Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. This video is the first in a series that will be all about the new updates to the OpenAI APIs that were talked about during the recent Dev Day. And in this video, we're going to be going back to the basics and be talking about the chat completions endpoint, which we've touched on the past. This time we'll be doing it with the GPT-4 model. And we'll be demonstrating how to create a simple Q&A like we have here in the playground, as well as some more advanced implementations such as creating a chatbot-like experience. All this just to build a basis for the updates that we're going to be talking about in the future videos of this series. So if you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. So to get started, we're going to be doing a refresher of the chat completions endpoint, or what you might know as like the GPT endpoint. And before I discuss what we see here in the documentation, let me just hop over to the editor and go over what I have set up here as a starting point. And again, I'm demonstrating this on Wix because, that's the channel, but this is really information that can be used with any front-end platform, with any back-end. So I hope that this will be valuable also to the larger AI community as well. But here what I have set up in my Wix website in Editor X is first I have a playground here, which will allow us to practice with like single prompt and response situations. And I also have this conversation set up, which is built to handle more of a standard chat. So for each thing that we do, we'll first be implementing it in the playground, and then we'll head over to the chat and see how to do it over there. So let me head back over to my playground, and we can go ahead and get started. So before we do anything here on the front end, we're going to want to build out our backend and make sure that we have communication with OpenAI and that we're managed to call the API successfully. So in order to do that, I'm going to head over to the backend, and I'm going to create a new web module for chat completions. And everything that I'm showing you here can also obviously be done in the other Wix editors as well. So in the classic editor, some of the design aspects might be a little more tough to do in the classic editor. And when it comes to Studio, so you should have full range of design, but the way that you write the code and where you write the code might change a little bit, but overall the principles should remain the same. So I set up here this backend for the chat completions. And let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see better. And what we're going to be doing here is setting up our basic for first API call to the chat completions API. So let me get rid of all this boilerplate code that comes with it. And I'm going to start by importing fetch, because that's something that we're going to need from Wix. Fetch. Another thing we're going to need is to get our secret. So get secret from Wix secrets backend. And I've already set up my secret here in the secrets manager, and I called it OpenAI underscore API key underscore key. I think that's what it's called. Maybe I'm blanking on what this is called. Yeah, lower dash underscore. And this is what we're going to be using. So I have my API keys stored here. And if you're not sure what your API key is, you'll need to open an account with OpenAI. And you should get a few free credits on the get-go. And then you can just copy over your key right over here. You might need to add a billing information if you've already used up all your free credits. So now that I've set up my imports and we've set up our API key inside of the secrets manager as well, I'm going to go ahead and create the function which will actually call the OpenAI chat completion API. And that's going to be an asynchronous function, and it's going to be called get chat completions, obviously completion, sorry, and this can be called whatever you want. This is just the name that I'm giving to this function. And I'm going to go ahead and export this function as well, because we're going to be using it in the front end, and also it allows me to do this testing in the back end when the time comes. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is get my API key. So I'm going to say const API key equals to await get secret. And I'm just going to copy over the name of my API key right over here. And that's probably the easiest part about what we're going to be doing. And now things start to get fun. So let's head over to the OpenAI API reference, and we'll see here what the request looks like that we need to send over. So first of all, we know it's going to be a post request, and here we have the endpoint. So let me copy over the endpoint and head back to the editor, and we can say here const endpoint equals 2, and I'm just going to store that here in a variable. And we can also set up the options for this request. So I'm going to say const options. And the first thing that we already know, that's the method. So that's going to be a post request. And we saw that in the documentation. And we're also going to need to set up a body. And this body, we're going to have to turn into JSON. So I'm going to say here JSON.stringify. And then here we're going to have our body. You could also write the body in a separate variable and then pass it in, whatever works for you. So here inside the body, let's see what we need to have. So one thing that we need to have is the messages. Another thing that we need to have is the model. And then we have a lot of other stuff here that all seem to be optional, which we'll discuss in a moment. But whenever I'm setting up an API, I always like to start with the very, very basic, so only the required, and then we can go in and add a little spice as things progress. So let's add in our messages. And this is going to be an array. And we're also going to have the model. So the model, we're going to want to use one of the more modern models, one of the more recent models, because that's why we're doing a refresher. So let's see what we have here in terms of model options. Let's see what we have here. So here we have, this is chat completions, GPT-4 and dated model releases. Okay, so I'm not going to we're going to talk about the vision preview later on, but for now I'm just going to use GPT-4 because that's the most recent stable model. So let me just copy that over. And our model is going to be GPT-4. And for our messages, we're going to want to pass in an array. Whoops. And there is a specific way that these messages need to be structured. So I'm going to just create a sample array of messages that we can use for testing in the backend. But in the end of the day, this message is going to wrap the prompt that we get from the front end. So let me say here const example messages. And this is going to be an array. And it's going to be an array with several objects. And let's see what those objects are supposed to look like. So here we see that we can have a system message. We can have a user message, and here there's also some new things here that are pretty recent from, I'm guessing, the dev day, which is the assistant message, which we'll also talk about later on. Assistant message is the message. Sorry, I got confused between the assistant API and the assistant message. So the assistant message is the message from the AI. The new things that we have are the tool message and the function message, which is depreciated. And there's another way to do functions now. So basically, the new thing is the tool message. Okay, so let's just set up a basic set of messages with a system message and a user message. Okay, so I'm going to head back to the editor. And first, we're going to have the role. Okay, so role is going to be system. And then we're going to have the content, which is the actual message. And here is basically where we're going to be giving instructions to the AI in terms of how to behave. And I just want to make sure that I point you in terms of the documentation where that can be read about. So here we're in text generation, chat completions. So here you can see an example of a few messages. So role system. And here, I'm pretty sure if you take a look here, you can get a little bit of an explanation as to how it's supposed to be set up. And if I take a look here, messages, so if we take a look here, show properties, and here it says what you need to have, so it's role, content, and optional name. Okay, so role and content are required, and here in this case it's system, and this is the contents of the system message. And the other types of messages follow the same principle. So here we're just going to say, you are a helpful AI bot. And in our next message, we're going to send an example of what a user might send. So let's say here, role, user, and in terms of content, we are going to say, what is the best color? Something the AI will definitely not be able to answer. And then we can pass these example messages here into messages. Again, just for testing purposes, eventually we're going to be passing in the messages as a parameter, or at least part of the messages as a parameter. And here now what we can do is combine this all together to make the actual request. So const response equals to await fetch, and we're going to pass in the endpoint, and we're going to pass in the options. And then here we're going to say const data, or that's what I call the actual body of the request. You can call it body, you can call it whatever you want. And of the response. And that's going to be await response.json. Basically, unpacking the JSON that comes back with the request. And we're going to return the data. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap this all here inside of a try-catch, just so we can do some error handling. And let's have here console.log error getting completion, and we're going to have the error. Awesome. So this is ready for testing. API key. I didn't pass in the API key, so that definitely would not work. Let's see in terms of where the API key is supposed to be passed in. So if I go here, this is the Node.js. So if I take a look here at curl, then we see here that it's passed in as a header, authorization bearer. So I'm actually just going to copy this right over. And I'm going to put that right over here. So here we're going to have our headers. And then that's going to be an object. And one of the headers is going to be authorization. And then it's going to have this bearer and OpenAI key. They actually named it the same thing as me. I didn't even try, I swear. Oh, but here I named it API key. Oh well. So here we're going to put in the API key like that and add in a comma. And now that should actually work. So let's go ahead and give it a test here. Whoops, get rid of that. And go ahead and hit run. So let's see, it was returned with an error. You must provide a model parameter. I thought I did. Let's take a look here. Get chat completion model parameter. Why is it not seeing my model parameter? Okay. So I think that I need to tell it also what the content type is going to be. Let's see if there's any, yeah. See here, content type application / JSON. I always forget to do that. So let's put that right over here in the headers as well. And I always like when I have an error because I'm sure that it's something that's going to happen to somebody else. So I prefer you see me make the mistake and then at least you understand potentially what might be going wrong instead of me doing it perfectly and then you not understanding why it's not working. Yeah, okay, so let's try it now like that. So let me go ahead and get rid of that and hit run. And yay, we got back our chat completion. Okay, so here, if we take a look, we can see choices and 0 and the actual message as an AI. I don't have personal taste, however, best color, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so basically, in terms of what we're going to want to return from this function, we're going to want to return this final message. That's going to be our data.choices0 message. So let me head over here to chat completions, and I'm going to return data.choices0 message. Awesome. And now we can set up our function to actually take in a variable. So what we're going to send in here is what we can do here is set in some messages. Okay, and that's what we're going to pass here to the variable. So I can just get rid of this, and this will pass in our messages. And we're going to need to we're now going to need to have another function which prepares these messages. We could just send in all the messages from the front end, but we may in the past. So this is a slight difference between what we did in the past and what we're doing now. So in the past, what we would need to do is we would need to cut out a certain amount of messages to provide kind of the message history, because with like the earlier versions like GPT-3 and 3.5, the token amount that you could pass in was on the limited side. But now we actually have models that can take a lot more tokens. So if we take a look here at like GPT-4, so we can have here like 8,000 something tokens, or we can even have up to like 32,000 tokens, which is a lot of tokens. So there's a little less need for kind of cutting the conversation short. If we wanted, we could set up kind of like an advanced function which calculates how many tokens are and cuts off the conversation based on that. But I'm going to start off just winging it without cutting off the conversation and see how much we can actually get in there without needing to make some kind of cut. So I'm just going to send in our messages directly from the front end. So let's head over to our front end and start playing around with this in the playground. Okay, so here I am in the playground, and as I mentioned earlier, what we're going to be doing here is setting up a simple one prompt, one response system. And even though the chat completions is quote unquote for chat, that's in the name, it's still the best model and endpoint to be using for one-off queries to OpenAI. So the previous completions endpoint is already officially here inside of legacy. So completions is what used to be, all the David and those other interesting model names. So that's what you used to use for like a one-off query. But now, if I'm not mistaken, the official position of OpenAI is that you should be using the chat completions for any kind of text generation, even if it's not a actual chat, but it's just kind of a one-off Q&A. So that's what we're going to be building over here as like a stepping stone to building out our actual full chat. And what we're going to do here is create a function. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a lot better. And I'll call that function, so it's going to be an asynchronous function, and let's call it ask question for now. I might change that later. And here what we're going to do is we're essentially going to get the content from this user input, okay, and we're going to display the question and the answer from the AI when it comes back over here. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to need to first grab this user input over here. Okay, so let me make that up. And yeah, I just want to zoom in enough so you can see, but so it doesn't. Okay, const, let's call it prompt equals select the user input dot value. And now what we're going to do is we are going to call the, I need to find a way to make this better. This is why I don't like Editor X in terms of creating YouTube videos. It just gets a little garbled. Yeah. Okay, sorry for the detour. Okay, so here I'm going to import our function from the backend. So it's the get chat completion from backend / chat completions. And then here we're going to say const messages. Okay, so remember that we need to send in not just our prompt, but we need to send in a whole thing of messages. And here I'm setting up the messages on the front end, but usually you'll probably want to send up part of the messages in the back end, specifically the part which defines the instructions for the system. Otherwise, you're kind of giving access to that aspect of the AI bot to the people in the front end, which is not ideal. But since this is the most simple, I'm starting with this, and then we can talk about how to make it a little more secure later on. So const messages, and here we're going to have role system and content. You are an AI bot. Answer the user's questions. Okay, something very simple. And here we're going to have the role user. And in terms of the content, it's going to be our prompt. Okay? And again, the naming here, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it prompt, you can call it question, you can call it query. It's really up to you. And here, now that we have the messages, we can call our chat completions function, get chat completion. So I'm going to say here const message equals to, and then we're going to say await get chat completion, and I'm going to pass in the messages. Okay? And now that we got back this message, it'll be a message that has both the role and the actual content. What we want is the actual content. So I'm going to say here const content equals to message. And we're going to display that content over here. Okay, so this AI content is going to be the content. So let me open this back up. Oh no. Oh no, what have I done? Let me zoom out a bit so I can close this side panel. Awesome. Excellent. So now that we got this content, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say AI content dot text equals to content. Awesome. So this should still work, but I do want to kind of pimp this up a little bit to make it a little better. And so what I'm going to do here is, as soon as we start asking the question, I'm going to show a loader that I have set up over here. Okay, you see there's a loader over here, and you can ignore these images for now. That's for a later tutorial. But I have a loader here, and we're also going to want to show this AI bubble. So I'm going to say loader.show, and let me just make sure that that loader is actually hidden from the get-go. So this will be hidden, and I'm going to show this bubble as well. And this is very specific to my design. Your design might work differently. So this is going to be the AI bubble dot, let's have dot expand. And I'm going to make sure that my AI bubble is collapsed. And then we're going to show the loader. And this AI content is going to be hidden to begin with. And I'm going to show the content after it comes back. So AI content dot show. And I'm also going to hide the loader, loader.hide. And yeah, we could talk about error handling as well. So I can say here, for example, if no message, then what we can do is we can say that AI content.text equals there was an error. Please try again. And we'll also add in a try catch here. So we can put, let's say, all of this in the try catch. And here we can say console.log error. And here we can say as well, starting to get long and crude and not dry, but okay. Awesome. And one more thing that I wanted to add in was that we'll show the user's question here as well. So let's set that up here. So this is the user bubble. So that'll start off collapsed as well. So once we ask the question and we have this user input, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say user bubble dot expand and user content dot text equals to prompt, and we're going to show the user content dot show, and let me just make sure that that's hidden from the get-go. And last but not least, just to make this all work, we need to attach this function as an event listener handler, event handler to the send button. Okay, so let's do that. Last piece of the puzzle, send button dot on click, ask question. And yeah, this looks pretty good. Let me just double check and see SEO basics. I just want to make sure this has a good URL here. So let's call this playground. And now what we can do is go ahead and hit publish. And let me check out the live site. Okay, so this is the home page. This is the chat we're going to be doing in the future. And what we want to take a look at is playground. Okay, so here I'm going to try typing a message. So what day is it today? And we'll hit that send button. And here we can see as an AI, I don't have real-time capabilities to provide the current date. Please check the date on your device. Okay, so this is an example of how it would look. It's a very crude setup, but this is a simple question and response in terms of using the AI. Obviously, the design here is kind of acting a little wacky, but that's something that can be fixed. So now that we have the basic setup in terms of simple kind of question and response, let's head over to the chat and see how we would create a kind of full kind of chat application with this, as well as talking about some of the more advanced things that we can do in the backend. Okay, so here I am back in the back end of our website, and I'm just doing a little setup before we head into the front end of our chatbot. So I created a new file called Chatbot and copied over the contents of the chat completion just to keep things separate. And here we're going to be building out all the functionality of our chatbot throughout all of the tutorials. And here, as I said, it's just a copy of what we did already in terms of the chat completion. And I'm going to be building a second function now, which will kind of be a wrapper function for the specific prompt that the user is sending through, so that we're handling as much as possible in the back end and not the front end. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to export async function, and I'm going to call this get chatbot response. And what it's going to do here is it's going to first have the instructions. So I'm going to say const instructions equals to, and here we'll have be a nice friendly chatbot. Okay, that's the instructions. And we can use that in order to build the system message. So I'm going to say const system message equals 2. And here we're going to have the role is system, and the content is going to be the instructions. And this is the message that we're going to append in the beginning of whatever messages we get in from the front end. So here we're going to be passing in messages from the front end. So the whole message history is going to be handled in the front end. And we're just going to be appending this system message whenever it comes in. So here we're going to have messages equals to messages dot unshift. And here we're going to put in the system message. And we can say here return await get chat completion and pass in the messages. Okay, and this is also where we'd want to add any other kind of logic. So for example, if we wanted to first, let's say, kind of cut down amount of messages in history. Okay, so let's say I pass in 100 messages here in the array, and I only want to send in the past 10 messages. Very similar to how you see in ChatGPT that after you're kind of having a conversation for a while, it forgets things that happened in the past. So here you'd want to determine how much of the history, and that would also have to do with what the tokenage that you can send in. So you might want to put in some kind of function here that can calculate the amount of tokens. That's a slightly more advanced topic, so I'm not going to touch on it right now. Roughly, if I'm not mistaken, there's about, you can count 4 characters as a token. It's not always like that, but on average, about 4 characters is a token. We could also, if we want here, set up some kind of tokenage limit. So here, if you wanted to limit the amount of tokens, then you can say, let's say, tokens, I don't know, 1,000. Okay, and this, oh, sorry. I should really look at the API reference before just saying things. Let's take a look here. I think it might be max tokens. Yeah, max tokens. Okay, so, but just take into account that the max tokens includes also the messages that you're passing in and also the response. So if you limit it to like 1,000, then you won't be able to pass in a lot of messages. That's max tokens. Okay, that's something else you can add in here. There are a bunch of other settings that you can add in. Let's just do like kind of there's all of these different frequency penalty, logit bias. Okay, all these things have to do with what kind of answer the AI is going to produce, how consistent the answers are going to be, how creative the answers are going to be, how repetitive the answers are going to be, and you can really take a look at the documentation and read, depending on your use case and how advanced you need your AI to be and what kind of responses you need it to give. Response format and seed, those we're going to talk about in the next tutorial. Those are new features that just came in on Dev Day. And stop is when it should stop. Stream we're also going to talk about in another tutorial. Temperature has to do with how deterministic or how random it is. Usually, oh, now it's between 0 and 2. I thought it used to be between 0 and 1. That might have changed. Etc., etc. Tools is a new thing that just came in. So there's a bunch of things that we can do here, and we're going to be talking about some of them in later tutorials. But the basics are really, from my perspective, max tokens and temperature. Those have been around for a while, so those two are pretty basic. We can add in temperature here as well, let's say. Temperature. I definitely spelled that wrong. I'm just going to copy it over from the documentation just to make sure I don't make any kind of mistake. There we go. So let's say temperature, we could have it as 1. That's kind of in the middle. That's the default. So if you want it to be like a little more creative, then you can do 1.5. Yeah. See, so I think that you see here it says higher values like 0.8 will make the output more random. I bet that they didn't change the documentation since they changed it to 2. Hmm, interesting. Because, like, if it goes from 0 to 2, 0.8 is not that high, I think. I don't know. Anyway, maybe. Comment if you comment, tell me what you think in the comments below. Is there a mistake here in the documentation? Um, sorry. Okay, detour. So here we are back here, and we have this set up. Get chatbot response, and this is what we're going to be using in the front end with our chatbot. So let me. Okay, so this is the front end of our chatbot, and let me just go over the basic setup so you understand what we're going to be connecting to what and how it's going to work. So this is just kind of a nice header, and here we have a repeater, and this repeater has 2 containers in each item. One is for the bot message, and the other is for the user message. And we have like kind of a little icon and the actual message bubble and the content of the message. Here for the bot, we have a little loading animation just while we're waiting for the response. And here we have a bar that's kind of pinned over here where we type in the messages and we can send the messages, okay, using this send button. So the setup is going to be in some ways similar to what we did before, but here, since we're populating a repeater, it's going to work a little differently. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll set up the send functions for when a user sends a message. So let's head into our code, and I'm going to zoom in. Try not to break things as I do. And looking good, looking good. Awesome, nothing broke. So let me import the nice function that we created in the backend just so we have it ready. So that was get chatbot response. I'm going to close this. Get chatbot response from backend / chatbot. Okay, and now here I'm going to create a new asynchronous function. So async function send message. And so first thing we're going to want to get here is the user input. So const user input equals 2. And I'm going to select the user input and tap into the value property. Okay, first thing done. And now that we have this user input, we're going to want to pass it into an array of messages. But the difference between what we're doing here and what we did before is that here it's not just a one-off message. Here we're going to have a few messages, and we're also going to be keeping a record of these messages as they come back and forth. Whoops, I hope I just hit my mic. I hope that that didn't bother you. We're going to keep track of these messages as they come back and forth between the user and the AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a global variable of messages, and it's going to be an array. And whenever we send a message, we are going to append this message to the array. And we're also going to want to display the messages inside of our repeater. Okay, so even before we start interacting with the chatbot, we have a little work to do. So let's create another function, async function. This doesn't need to be async, actually. It should be regular function. And we'll call this log message. Okay, and log message, it'll add the message to these messages, and it will also display the message in the repeater. And again, might change this function name later on. We'll see. So log message, and here we'll pass in a message, and then we'll say that messages equals to messages dot push message, and why is this giving me an error? Type number is not assignable to messages. Type number. Okay. I'll figure out why that's giving me an error in a second. But basically, after we get these messages, we're going to want to populate the repeater. So let's create another function, lots of functions, and this is going to be populate messages repeater. And here I'm going to be using for each item. So let's say, let's select our repeater. So messages repeater. And this here I've named all this stuff already. So if you don't have the things named on your side, then you're going to want to go into each item here, each element, and give it a name. But messages repeater is the repeater with all the messages. And we're going to set up a dot for each item. And we're going to have the item, and we're going to have the item data. And awesome. So what we're going to do here inside of this callback function is we're going to assign values to the different to the item elements, and we're going to do that conditionally based on what the role is. So if item data dot role equals to user, then what we're going to do here is we're going to select the user content, and we'll say that dot text equals to item data dot content. Whoopsie daisy. Okay, and if I want to already make my life a little easier from the get-go, what I can do is say const role content equals to item data. Just kind of deconstruct that a little bit so I don't have to keep on writing item data every single time. And what we'll also do is we will user message dot show. Okay, so we'll show the user message, and that looks pretty good, except for here I wrote by accident W instead of item. So this needs to be item, and this needs to be item. And now what we can do is put this all together. So here, after we get the user input, we'll say const message equals to, and we'll have this as an object, and we'll say role user and content user input. And then we can say log message, and here we'll put in the message. And I still need to figure out why this is not working here. Messages, why is it saying number? Number is not assignable to type any. Messages, messages.push message. Oh, I don't need this actually. Yeah, so push doesn't, I guess I forgot that push doesn't return anything. Or maybe maybe it returns the maybe it returns the index of the, no, maybe it returns the length of the array. I don't remember, but apparently. But basically push, you could just call push and you don't need to reassign it to something. So that's my mistake there. And here I'm going to want to call also populate messages repeater. Cool. Now I'm just going to add the send message. I'm going to bind it to the send button. So send button dot on click send message. So currently all this should be doing is adding the user message to the repeater and displaying it. So if that works, then awesome. If not, we're going to have to fix it. So let's go ahead and test that out. Awesome. And here I'm going to head to the home page. No. Don't look. Dev day. Oh, God. Got it. There we are. Okay, so here we are. And you can see that the repeater isn't showing because there's no data in the repeater yet. And as I say those words, I remembered one important thing. So repeaters, for those of you who watch the channel, and we talk about repeaters every other week, you probably know that in order for this to work, our messages are going to need to have unique IDs for them to be able to be passed into the repeater. So basically, when we create a message, what we're going to want to do is add unique IDs. And the way that I like to do it is that when we're actually assigning the data to the repeater, which I see we also didn't do here. So basically, I skipped quite a few steps here. So basically, yeah, so here, populate repeater. What we're going to do here is first pass data into the repeater. So this is going to be messages repeater dot data, and that's going to be equal to messages. But instead of having it just equal to messages, I'm going to map these messages so that for each message, we're going to have the actual message. So let me spread in the message. And we're also going to have a unique ID, which needs to be a string. And for this, I like to use the UUID package, as some of you may already know. And I have it here imported already, so UUID. If you don't have it imported, then you can go and install npm package and just search for UUID and then hit install. Okay, so that's already installed. So I can just import that here, and I'm going to import that here on top. So let's add that here. Import let's import version 4 as UUID v4 from UUID. There are just several versions in the package, and then we can create a new ID as simple as calling that function right over there. Awesome. Now I'm feeling I'm feeling a little better. Let's actually start testing now. So I'm going to refresh this page over here. And let's try typing a message. Hello. And hit send. And nothing happened. That's sad. So let me go into the console and see if we have any errors here. Okay, I don't see any errors. So that probably means that I just didn't show the right thing here. Let me double check my naming conventions. Select this right over here. And okay, user bubble. It's not hidden. So I said user message.show. User message.show. Role equals user. That should be true. Let's see. Log message. Messages.push message. Populate messages repeater. So let me here say console.log messages. And let me go ahead and publish that. And refresh. And I have a hunch. Well, let's see. Oh, I just didn't refresh enough. That always happens. That always happens. Oh well. Yeah, there's like a kind of a delay between the publishing and when you refresh and whatever. But anyway, okay, so that's working as expected. I don't want it to show this this blank image at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse both of these images. Therefore, another tutorial. Basically, when we're going to start incorporating cool image stuff into the chatbot. Small promo. Okay, so that is working now as expected. And now what we can do is actually add the chatbot's message to the whole equation here. So what we can do is I can get rid of this console log because it is working here. And now what we're going to want to do is get, oh my gosh, why can't I select this? Okay. And now what we're going to want to do is get the response from the AI. Zoom in here one more. And so here in the send message, basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the response. So const, let's say answer, or AI response, or chatbot response, let's call it chatbot response equals to await get chatbot response. And here we're going to pass in the messages. Okay, and here we're passing in this global variable of messages. So this is going to include all the messages from the conversation. And then what we can do here is when we get this chatbot response back, we can say messages dot push chatbot response. And there's some error handling that we should be doing here as well. But for now, we'll just go the optimistic route. So messages.push chatbot response, and then we can log message. Actually, sorry, I don't need to do that. I can just call log messages because we're good boys and we set up functions for everything. So chatbot response. Okay. And yeah, what we can also do here is as we are waiting for this chatbot response, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the chatbot, bot message dot show. Oh. Okay, so this is not going to work. Okay, we'll have to think about that in a second. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically, we get the response back, and now here we just need to set up inside of the messages repeater what happens if we have if role equals to assistant, okay, because that's the role that's going to come back from the bot. If the role equals to assistant, then what we're going to do is we're going to say that the user, the bot content dot text equals to content, and the bot message here, bot message dot show, and we're also going to want to show the bot bubble dot show. Yeah, so basically what I was trying to do before is put in the whole loader, but it's actually a little more complex, I remembered, than simply putting it in that function. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But this should be enough to display the response from the assistant. So let's go ahead and hit publish and see if that's working. And head over here, and I'm going to just refresh. And let's start off with hello. And maybe it's a refresh problem. Let's try that again. Oh, just finished publishing. So let me hard refresh twice. Hello. And something should be happening. Something should be happening. I'm not giving up yet. Let's try one more time. If not, we can add in some console logs. Okay, so let me start by opening up the logs here in the backend. Okay, this can kind of show us what's going on in the backend once we send in a message. So let me try sending hello again. Ah, logs, error getting completion, cannot read the property 0 of undefined. Okay, okay. So let's take a look at our backend functions and see what might have gone wrong. Get chatbot response. Choices is coming back as undefined. I I bet you it's this temperature thing. I bet you it's the temperature. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add here console.log. No, actually what I'll do, I'll just return, let's just try running this function. I'll in the back end, I'm going to take temperature. And this is good that I separated everything so that we can kind of test things out separately. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the temperature in our previous that we did for the playground. And I'm just going to run the playground here with our example messages and see if it throws an error with the temperature. Let's see. It's taking a very long time. Let me add in here. Let's add in a log console.log response. This is very interesting. If I manage to find, I'll be very proud of myself if I manage to find a mistake in the documentation. Oh no, it came back. Ah, okay. So it wasn't the temperature that was an issue. Um, it wasn't the temperature that was the issue apparently. So that takes us back to the drawing board. Let me just okay, let's see. Chat completions. Error getting completion. Cannot read the property 0 of undefined. So let's just add in here some, what's in here? Console.log response. And here we'll add in console.log data. And publish that. Clear our logs. And let's refresh here 3 times. And let me send in hello. Okay, so here we got a bad request. Bad request. Message 2 is not of type array. Oh, okay. Let's see. Hmm. Okay. Home. Messages. Oh, I know what's going on. So the same mistake that I made with the push is the mistake that I made here with the unshift. So push like unshift, it will, here I guess it returns the length of messages instead of, yeah, oh God. I gotta review my array uh my array methods. Uh-oh. Okay, so I published that again. Let me refresh. And let's try this. Hello. gonna try again. 1 second. I just in case it didn't refresh. I'm gonna refresh 3 times. Uh, Excellent. Okay, so it's not perfect. Yeah, for example, like it kind of let me send these 2 messages in a row. So there's a few things that we need to fix there, and also you can see the loader is showing, which shouldn't be showing, unless it's actually loading. So let's deal with adding kind of a little slightly better user experience here to our chatbot. And there's a few things that I want to do. So first of all, we'll set it up so that when we send the message, first of all, there will be a minimum. So like, let's say if there's less than 2 characters, then it won't send the message. And also it will clear this value once we send the message to create like a slightly better user experience. We'll also set up the loading so that like while we're waiting for the actual message to come back, we'll see this loader here with the bot. Okay, so those are the few basic things that I want to set up. We'll also do kind of send on enter key. So like when you press the enter key, it'll send the message as well. So not only when you click here on the send button. So those are a few things that I want to set up to kind of improve the user experience. So let's head over and do that now. Okay, so here I am back on the home page, the conversation page, the chat page. And what I'm going to be doing is adding in those features that I just mentioned. So the first thing that I'm going to add in here, let me just zoom in one more, is the prevention of sending the message if it's, let's say, under 2 characters. So I'm going to do that right over here in the send message function. And I'm going to say here that if the user input dot length is smaller than 2, I'm just going to return and not execute the rest of the function. It would be nice to give the user some kind of indication that there's kind of an issue that they didn't write enough. We can talk about that later on. For now, I'm just going to prevent them from sending the message. And I'm also going to completely erase the content of the user input, the value, when they send the message to prevent them from kind of sending multiple messages at the same time. So here we're going to say that the user input dot value should be equal to an empty string. So that should settle that. And now what I want to do is add in that loading state. So basically, as soon as the user sends a message, we want to indicate that the chatbot is kind of loading while we're waiting for the assistant message. And the way I'm going to do that is by kind of slipping in a fake message here before we actually pass the messages to the messages repeater. And I'm going to add in a condition here that if messages dot messages, so I'm going to select the last message, which is always hard to do in JavaScript. So messages, I'm selecting the index of messages dot length -1, and if that dot role equals to user, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, here we'll have a global variable, so let repeater messages, or let's call it repeater message data. Maybe a little too long, but anyway, repeater message data equals to messages dot push, and here I'm going to pass in a fake message, and the role is going to be loading, and it's not going to have any content. Okay, so the content is going to be blank. And then here, instead of passing in messages to the repeater, I'm going to be passing in this repeater message data. Okay, and repeater message data equals to, oh, I made the same mistake again. I can't believe myself. Okay, there we go. Repeater message data dot push role loading. And basically, so what will happen here is that if the user is the one sending a message, it'll add in kind of that fake loading message. And if it's an assistant, then it'll skip this part. And here we'll have a problem, so I'm happy that I talked you guys through it. So this will be equal to messages. Messages. Yeah, that's a good tip. Always talk through your code and then it'll help you debug it as you go. So basically, this repeater message data will be equal to just the messages if there's the last message is not from the user, and it won't add in that fake loading state. And now here inside the repeater, all I have to do is deal with that kind of loading state. So if role equals to loading, and this is already getting to be long enough for a switch. If role equals loading, then we're gonna show the bot bubble, and we're gonna show the loader. Bot bubble dot, loader loading animation dot show. And here we're gonna say, or we can actually have it just showing by default like it was before. And then here we can just hide it. That's also a good option. Loading animation dot hide. Okay, let's try this out now. Should I add in the last feature that I said I wanted to add? Yeah, let's do that. So we said that when we press the enter key, we're going to want to send the message as well. So that's going to be here. I'm going to bind an event listener to the user input. And that's going to be dot on key press, if I'm not mistaken. And here we're going to have the event. And we'll say that if event.key equals to enter, then what we'll do is we will send message. Yeah, there's like I'm 50-50 on if I remembered how to do this correctly. But yeah, if not, we'll debug. So let me go ahead and publish and refresh over here. And let's say hello. No, okay, it did not do it. Yeah, refresh again. And refresh again and again. And hello. And dun, 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 dun. So it didn't show the loading state, which is disappointing. Cannot read the properties of undefined reading role. Okay, let's see where I made a mistake. Cannot read the properties of undefined reading role. Okay, then this is the undefined. Messages dot length minus 1 dot role. Okay, let's see. Let's add in here console.log messages. Publish that. Okay, so this did work. So here we see roll, here we see loading. But for some reason it called it again with undefined. Because we're getting a backend error again. Because it's sending it with the loading. 1 second, 1 second. I'll figure it out. Um, Basically when this is happening, so it's sending it with the loading message, which it shouldn't be doing. Okay. So this has to do with a fun JavaScript concept of copies, shallow copies, stuff like that. So basically when I assign messages to repeater message data, this is actually, it's not its own array. It's like just another pointer to the same array. So when I do push here, I'm actually pushing the loading to this original array of messages. So what I want to do here is actually spread the messages array into a new array and assign that to the repeater message data. And that should do the trick, I think. So let's try that out. Hit refresh. And again, and again, just to be sure. And hello. And I'm going to press enter now just to check if the enter key is working. So that was the enter key. As you can see, my mouse is nowhere near the enter, and boom, there we go. We have the chatbot's answer. So that's awesome. Let me try something else. Write me a story, something that's going to take a little more time. Okay, so I'm not seeing the loading, which is not good. So let's see why that's not happening. Bot bubble, this should be bot message. Bot message. Publish. Refresh. Write me a short story. Okay, so now we see the loader coming in over here. And I caught an eye, I caught like in the corner of my eye an error here, a 504 error. And this actually has to do with, yeah, okay. So this time it did come back. And it's like, this is the weirdest, this is the weirdest API response I've ever seen. Whoa. Maybe that's because the temperature is high? This is super weird. Let me try changing the temperature to under 1. Maybe if the temperature is over 1, then it goes crazy. Let's see. This is part of the fun because like these are new releases and stuff, so if you're not playing around and testing things, then you're doing it wrong. Let me publish that. Wow, that is the weirdest. What kind of story is that? Okay, so let's try refreshing this. And write me a short story in English. Let's see what it comes back with. So just back to the 504 error. So sometimes if the response takes too long, then there can be an error between, like a timeout error between the back end and front end of Wix. And basically the way to get around that is by using real-time, Wix real-time. And I have a tutorial that explains specifically about that. And I'll be setting it up here as well. But I'll probably do it a little quickly. So if you need to like kind of understand what's going on, you might want to check out my real-time tutorials and the 504 error tutorials. And now that I changed the temperature to zero point 0.5, then it seems to be a comprehensible um, a comprehensible story. That is super interesting. Yeah. Set temperature to 0 and 2. Apparently, if it's over 1, then it goes ballistic, apparently. Um, yeah, so that is, I think we're going to wrap up here because this part of the tutorial is getting a little long. And I think this constitutes as a good refresher for the chat completions endpoint. In the future tutorials, we're going to go more in depth in some of the newer features that came in, how to do streaming, how to do the vision, stuff like that. So if you like this tutorial and you want to see more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And let me know what you think. Let me know what projects you're building, more tutorials that you want to see. You can do that in the comments below. And I hope to see you next time.